A small-time con artist from the bottom of Argentina's underworld walked off with $30 million in cash from a bank using nothing but one fake fax from the central bank. December 1992, the middle of Argentina's summer. In the back office of the Banco de Santa Fe branch in Rosario, the AC had died hours earlier. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Quitting time had come and gone, and 4 employees were still working. They kept repeating the same motions, carrying, counting, boxing, stacking. Piled in front of them were old 500,000 Austral bills. Argentina was in the middle of a currency overhaul at the time. This old currency, wrecked by hyperinflation, was about to be pulled from circulation entirely, with 10,000 Australs converting to 1 peso, and the old bills were being boxed up for destruction. The whole collection process was chaos. The holidays were coming, cash flow was tight, huge amounts of old bills were being shuttled between vaults, and oversight was full of holes. And in the middle of that chaos, a fax arrived at the branch. A fax is the kind of document that naturally makes people drop their guard. The paper comes out warm from the machine, stamped with an official seal and signature, and whoever sees it instinctively believes it. The fax was headed Central Bank of Argentina, and it was urgent. It ordered the Rosario branch to get the 500,000 denomination bills in its vault ready immediately to be picked up by inspectors and transferred to Buenos Aires by morning. Nobody dared drag their feet on an order from the central bank, so the night shift started counting and packing right away. What they didn't know was that the seal on the fax was just an image made at a print shop. The signature belonged to no real person, and the destination in the capital wasn't a central bank vault at all. It was a private airport, where the people waiting weren't on any official payroll. Everyone believed the document, except for one man. A few hours earlier, the vault manager who'd taken the fax, Norberto, felt a knot of unease in his stomach. He'd run that vault for 30 straight years. He was naturally suspicious by nature, and by all rights, this was exactly the kind of scam that should never have worked on someone like him. He didn't just carry out the order. Every instinct told him something was off. The timing, the tone, the sheer size of the transfer, all of it felt wrong. 30 years of experience don't just switch off because a piece of paper has an official stamp on it. Norberto did the one thing everyone would consider the standard, careful move. He called the central bank to verify the order. This was the moment the whole heist could have collapsed. If whoever answered the phone had simply said, "We never sent that order," the cash would have stayed in the vault. The night shift would have gone home, and the entire scheme would have died right there. He dialed the number, the call went through, and a calm official voice told him the order was real. It came from the central bank, and to carry it out immediately. When the inspectors arrived that morning, driver Elverdi's doubts vanished on the spot. What he had no way of knowing was that the crew had already anticipated that a careful man would call to verify, and they'd set a trap for exactly that. Norberto's call never actually reached the central bank switchboard. The line had been hijacked, and the person who answered was a member of the gang, posing as an official and calmly confirming the fake order. That's the cruelest part of the whole setup. It wasn't built to catch careless people. It was built to catch careful, by-the-book people. The verification process that was supposed to protect the bank ended up being the thing that authorized the robbery. Norberto didn't skip the check. He did it, and did it seriously. The problem was that the check itself had been rigged from the start. Once he hung up, his guard was completely down, and he gave the order for the night shift to start packing up the cash. The man behind all of this is nothing like what you'd picture. People assume a heist this big had to be masterminded by a seasoned, cold-blooded professional criminal, but the man in charge, Hector Rima, known as Tito, was nobody until this job. Before this, he was a nobody in the criminal underworld, just a street con man running Argentina's classic devil's deal scam, talking ordinary people out of their savings, small-time stuff that never made headlines. And that's the most ironic part of this whole case. Argentina's most flawless bank heist wasn't pulled off by some criminal genius. It was pulled off by a lifelong, small-time hustler. His idea was simple. If one story could empty an ordinary person's wallet, why couldn't the same trick empty an entire bank? Bottom line, this whole heist was just a street scam scaled way up. A story convincing enough that the victims handed over everything willingly and even felt good about doing their job right. Tito knew he couldn't pull it off alone, so he built a crew and split the work by task. To make the paperwork look real, he brought in the Colia brothers, Gregorio and Nestor, who ran a print shop. one that had actually done legitimate printing work for banks before, so they knew exactly what official documents were supposed to look like. Since the job had to cross provincial lines, he brought in a Uruguayan named Sergio. The most important piece was learning the bank's internal procedures, paperwork, sign-off authority. So he turned two bank employees, Lorenzo and Hector Mena, who kept feeding the crew inside information. The phone hijack only worked because of that inside information. The vault door was really open from the inside. There was one more unremarkable member of the crew, Horacio Ansel, who also worked at the Colia print shop. At the time, he looked like a nobody, but he'd later be the one who brought the whole thing crashing down. Tito's weapon wasn't a gun, and it wasn't muscle. It was trust. The fake fax exploited people's trust in official paperwork. The hijack phone call exploited people's trust in verifying things by phone, and the forged IDs exploited people's trust in uniforms and official positions. Hardly anyone actually examines a stamped document closely. Hardly anyone doubts a verification call they made themselves. And when people see officials who look and act the part, their instinct isn't to stop them. Tito understood something crucial. A bank's real defense isn't its walls, its vault, or its security guards. It's the trust everyone carries in their heads. And trust can be faked. Everything was in place. The fax was delivered, the phone lines were rigged, the IDs were printed, and the whole crew was waiting for morning. On the morning of the 23rd of December 1992, at the private terminal of Fisherton Airport on the outskirts of Rosario, the agreed handoff point, 3 central bank inspectors showed up right on time, well-dressed, calm, carrying forged IDs from the Colia print shop that were almost impossible to tell from the real thing. They introduced themselves as central bank staff, there to take custody of the funds, and no one questioned them. There was no dark alley in this operation, no masks, no weapons in sight. The whole thing played out in broad daylight, inside a public airport terminal. The bank employees stood off to the side while 13 sacks sat there, stuffed with $30 million in old bills. The conmen acted completely at ease, like this kind of handoff was routine business for them. There was one small hiccup along the way. The scheduled commercial flight got delayed, and for a job transferring central bank funds on an urgent timeline, that wasn't acceptable. The inspectors made a quick call and chartered 2 small planes on the spot, at a cost of about $900, nothing next to $30 million. That kind of quick thinking fit perfectly with what people expect from officials: solve the problem fast, get the job done, and it made the whole illusion even more airtight. The sacks were loaded in batches, 7 onto the first plane and 6 onto the second. On that summer morning, the 2 small planes lifted off, carrying about 600,000 old bills, headed for San Fernando, just outside Buenos Aires. When they landed, there was no armored truck and no police escort waiting, just a few ordinary civilian cars. The cash was loaded up and driven into the sprawl of the capital, and it was gone. There was no gunfire, no alarms, just polite people and paperwork that looked flawless. The 2 small planes carried the fortune away. The robbed bank employees watched them fly off, and everyone assumed the case was closed. The perfect crime. $30 million had vanished into thin air. The police had no leads at all, and for weeks the case went absolutely nowhere. No guns meant no ballistics evidence. No violence meant no injured witnesses who could describe a suspect. And the inspectors had been polite and carried convincing IDs before disappearing into a city of several million people. There was basically nothing to go on. The crew walked free while the stolen money kept getting split up, hidden, and laundered. On the surface, they'd gotten away with everything, but no plan, no matter how tight, can survive a guilty conscience. Ansel, the unremarkable print shop worker on the crew, was eaten alive by guilt day and night. He couldn't confess to the police, and he couldn't tell his family either, and the weight of it was crushing him. Ansel followed Umbanda, a faith widely practiced along the Rio de la Plata. Whenever the guilt got to be too much, he'd go find the spiritual guide he trusted most. So he traveled to a small temple in Lanús, south of Buenos Aires, found his spiritual father, and told him everything: the fake fax, the hijacked phone line, the airport handoff, the planes full of cash, every last detail, just to find some peace of mind. What he had no idea was that this trusted spiritual advisor was also a police informant. The investigation had been stuck cold, with no physical evidence to go on, and in the end, this nearly flawless heist was undone by one man's genuine confession. Faith did what the police investigation couldn't. That confession became the break in the case. Ansel was arrested in early 1993, and following his statement, the rest of the crew went down one by one. The Collier brothers, the Uruguayan accomplice, and the two bank insiders were all caught. But the story didn't end with the kind of justice people expected. The case dragged through the courts for years. The trial didn't open until 1998, and the verdict didn't come until 2002, a full 10 years after the heist. The sentences ended up shockingly light. The Collier brothers and their Uruguayan accomplice got 4 years. The two bank employees got 3.5, and several defendants were acquitted outright, including some vault staff the court decided had simply been fooled. After 10 years and a $30 million case, only a handful of people ended up with anything close to a real sentence. Tito, the man behind it all, posted 400,000 pesos in bail before the trial and walked free, and the paperwork used for that bail was forged too. He pulled off one massive con, and then, on the way out, conned the entire justice system as well. In 1994, Tito vanished without a trace, and when police tracked down a property linked to him, all they found was one of his accomplices, caught in the middle of trying to burn a stash of hidden cash. Most of the stolen money has never been recovered. Tito built his entire criminal operation on trust, and in doing so, he proved that what really protects a bank was never just the vault and the steel doors. It's the trust people carry in their heads, and trust can be faked.